Azt tikrinau. Nu, gerai, nes visada tas perėjimas būna. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Ignas Kalpokas. My primary affiliation is as associate professor at Vytautas Magnus University, although I'm also affiliated with some other places. I'm visiting a lecture at Vilnius University. For a few months, I even taught at this university, the Lithuanian University of Health Sciences, without ever visiting a classroom here because, hey, the pandemic and so on. So it's really interesting and a pleasure to finally visit the place. So my personal interest is the way in which technologies, digital technologies in particular, shape our lives with particular focus on disinformation and kind of changing the information environment that we live in. And for this reason, when I was asked to say something today, I chose this particular topic: what goes after fake, dystopian, and utopian alternatives. Now, one thing that we must be mindful, and I think that we have become more mindful of, certainly during the pandemic, is that fake stuff is all around. We are always surrounded by conspiracy theories, we are surrounded by unverified claims, and we are surrounded by intentionally manufactured content that is trying to deceive us in various ways. And the real irony here is that we ourselves kind of failed to do anything about it. Partly because we seem to be enjoying what we see online. We seem to be enjoying what's delivered to us, particularly in places like social media. And given the fact that across many Western societies, more than 50% of individuals now primarily receive their information about various societal issues from social media, that's something we need to bear in mind. Why we seem to enjoy that and why we get more of what we like is inherent in the way today's media environment operates, inherent in the way today's digital platforms operate. They display to us content that we cannot fail to like, and therefore we are nudged towards choices that we cannot fail to make. And the first reason for that is something that we media scholars often refer to as datafication. Datafication is this process or this effort to essentially take everything in this world, everything under the sun, and turn it into data. Turn it into something that describes us as users, as audiences, in particular, things that make us tick, including our psychological profiles, our ideological convictions, our biases, taken for granted assumptions, the friendship networks that we have, and the information that circulates within those friendship networks that we have. And all of that allows building of very detailed and very finely grained profiles of us as users of information. And if we are supplied with the right type of information at the right time, regardless of how critical we are, regardless of how skeptical we are more or less bound to choose what's provided for us. It's just important that the right stuff is supplied at the right time. And stuff is going to reach us. That is where the platformization bit comes in. Because when we think about it more clearly, Pretty much everything we do today is based on some kind of online platform or app or similar thing. Now, from dating to information acquisition to taking a ride somewhere, now it's all usually conducted via an app or a platform. And again, there's quite a good reason why that is the case. Because the more popular particular platforms get, the more painful and the more costly it is for us to remain outside. If all of your friends are on a particular social media platform, be it Facebook if you're old-fashioned, or Instagram, TikTok, anything else, you have to be on that platform because otherwise you're excluded. Otherwise, you're kind of socially non-existent, really. So this pressure then lures us in or forces us even into partaking in social media platforms and other platforms as well. If all of your potential dates are on Tinder, then you bloody have to be on Tinder. Okay, so in that sense, information that's on social media is going to reach us. It's going to reach us and people similar to us. And if our friend networks comprise of similar individuals, and they do actually, we seem to have more homogeneous social networks online than we do offline. Partly because we can't really choose our offline contacts. Now, if we are entering a particular workplace environment or study environment or something else, we are faced with people who are there. Now, you can't choose your course mates, your co-workers, etc. But you can choose whom you follow and whom you friend on social media. And it's always kind of nicer to us if we choose people who think in a similar way or have very similar positions. And even if we don't, the way in which content moderation algorithms work on social media is, we're going to see more content that's being shared by people with similar views to us. It's perfect business sense. The more content we see that we like, the more time we're going to spend on those social media platforms. If we constantly encounter content that's against our views and irritating and so on, then we will move somewhere else. But if we get that imaginary confirmation of our own views, of our own positions, then everything feels nice. Then we engage more, therefore we leave more data as well, and we are better consumers in that sense, from a purely commercial point of view. Of course, from a broader societal perspective, that contributes to greater polarization, and that also contributes to what's known as information or filter bubbles on social media, where we consume more information that's similar to what we already believe in. And if we see more people posting similar stuff, we think, yeah, everything thinks the way we do. Everybody thinks the way we do. Whereas in practice, that might necessarily be the case. And in that sense, it becomes very easy to nudge us towards certain behaviors because, again, we don't want to be outliers. We don't want to feel like, we're the stupid ones who don't understand things, because the majority of people probably do understand things, even if that majority is imaginary. So this particular model is based on surveillance pretty strongly, and on some kind of platform-based big brother watching you. Though most probably it's this big brother watching you. So surveillance, observation of our behaviors, collection of those data trails that we leave with pretty much every behavior that we commit to. Even now, simply by sitting here, we are generating data because this device is broadcasting the fact that we're in the same place together, doing something. Perhaps then there's something common to all of us. Perhaps there's some data pattern to be followed up. So you don't really have to do anything to generate data these days. The big issue, the big problem here is the question below. What do these particular data sets represent? Because they are often assumed to be kind of accurate and a really detailed representation of ourselves. To some extent, they are, but there is a fundamental problem. And for that problem, to illustrate that problem, these two paintings by René Magritte, I find them really useful. Those data profiles work as mirrors of a very particular kind, and that is why this painting really rings a bell with me, because those mirrors do reflect something. They reflect us, but they reflect us from somebody else's vantage point. If you think of conventional mirror, you look at it and you see yourself from your own vantage point. You see your own face and so on and so forth. The way in which database profiles operate, they represent you from somebody else's vantage point, in the sense that certain bits of data, certain parts of your data profile, they're picked and collected because they make some kind of commercial sense. And therefore, what you see is not yourself as you would like to see yourself, but the way in which somebody else sees you. And this then brings me to this other painting that famously says that this is not a pipe. Of course it's not a pipe. It's a depiction of a pipe. This is, I think, a commonly assumed error that not just common users make, but also some of the commentators on datafication and database targeting make, that they mistake a representation based on commercial interests of either social media platforms or various consultancies and intermediaries who perhaps collect data and then provide consultancy services to politicians, saying, hey, you need to devise a particular program or to make a particular set of promises or use certain keywords in your communication in order to trigger this and that kind of emotional response. So it's their version of you, their representation of you, which makes me question the autonomy of decision-making, because who is then making decisions in this new information environment? Is it us choosing things? Is it us choosing what kinds of information to believe in, what kind of people to follow, what kind of politicians to vote for? Or is it really the data-rich actors that can guide our behaviors, that know precisely what we need to be offered in order to behave as they want us to behave? So really, in the current information environment, everything is kind of taken care of. And it's taken care of not just in the form of structuration of the information environment that I've been just talking about. It's also about what we're not being shown. Various purpose-made absences that are no less important to today's digital media than what we are presented with. Here, a piece of research on so-called digital voids was really, I think, influential on me personally, and the way in which I'm trying to conceptualize some of the stuff that's really puzzling me. So if data-rich actors know what to show to us to invoke emotions and to make us choose, they also know what cannot be shown to us in order to avoid confusing our choice environment or to avoid triggering us in a negative way. So what kind of information to essentially push away from us. I'm not using the term hide because that kind of almost borders conspiracy theory. You know, they're hiding something from us, that kind of stuff. No, they're not purposefully hiding something from us. They just know that we're going to be triggered, offended, or somehow else affected in a way that they don't want us to be affected. And therefore, information that does not fit our data profile is not something that we're going to encounter. Plus, digital media actors have another major power. They have the power of deplatforming and deplatformization, so removing individuals and organizations from their own platforms, or in terms of hosting, removing entire platforms from the online world. And although I think there's a very good argument to be made that, well, perhaps the world is a better place without Trump on Twitter, Trump being deplatformed by Twitter, it does raise quite fundamental questions, because that raises questions of who decides what's legitimate, what's illegitimate. Traditionally, those would be courts or lawmakers by passing certain legislation, saying, well, okay, this particular speech is acceptable or unacceptable. Those particular actions are acceptable or unacceptable. Now it's online platforms doing the choices, whether to ban certain people or not, whether to remove certain feeds or not. And that can be gained quite easily by, let's say, randomly reporting content as somehow inappropriate, and then the platform just kind of removing it, taking a unilateral decision to remove content or people. Again, it's not to say that those removals are always unwarranted or something, but it just signals a very important shift in power, where we lose the capacity to deal with things politically. In our conventional understanding, you know, if we don't like the way in which things are regulated, we could just vote for different politicians come the next election. We can't vote for decision makers on Twitter's executive board or Facebook's or somebody else's. And in that sense, this can be seen as adding to that disempowerment of us as users of information. And that's kind of a vague association of absence in the form of Van Gogh's shoes. So yeah, why do we enjoy fake then? Why is fakery so important? And that has been a question that I've been looking into for the past 5 or 6 years, that I've published quite a bit on, and it's still kind of bothering and bugging me, really. But the best explanation currently available is that we have kind of always preferred comfortable lies over inconvenient truths, because it just makes life easier. And very often, it's easier to make a good narrative out of fake stuff. Because as human beings, we live and die by narratives. We need to feel that things that happen in the world are not random. We need to be able to connect stuff and to kind of see a trajectory in what is happening. So we see the world in terms of stories and narratives. And with fake news and fake information, they're completely unconstricted. They're not bound by facts. So you can always shift and twist them to explain anything and to give this imaginary coherence to our lives. Whereas with facts, they're very problematic because they can't really be bent in any direction depending on what your audience likes. And also, facts that are available at hand do change. New things get discovered. Previously taken for granted theories are uprooted by new scientific discoveries and so on. And therefore, it's very easy for, let's say, conspiracy theorists to say, well, you know, a few years ago, you were saying something completely different. So how come? Perhaps you're lying. Perhaps you're just inventing stuff. Because the only thing that doesn't change is conspiracy theories. Because they don't need to react to facts. They don't need to react to the real world at all. They can just kind of plow through their main narrative, and that's it. Whereas the world changes, our knowledge changes, and therefore it's more difficult to create a coherent narrative based on fact, on scientific information. So that's something that we really struggle with. Also, what needs to be kept in mind is that there's just too much information around. I think we all feel quite often that we're overwhelmed with information. There's loads of stuff available across social media. Whenever we grab our phones, there's various push notifications coming in, and we're reading something, then somebody texts us, and we get distracted, and so on and so forth, and we just don't have enough time to deal with everything. That's the downside of this explosion in media of various sorts. And in order to somehow deal with that onslaught of information, we need quick solutions. We need to be able to sort information quickly. For example, as we're scrolling through a social media feed, we need to decide where to concentrate our attention on and what to just skip. And here, intuition. Very simple, very basic emotional reactions, such as like, don't like, love, hate, and so on. Those kind of very quick and very basic solutions, they're absolutely crucial in determining whether we're going to follow up on something, whether we're going to open up some kind of story or anything. And again, it's all about being able to trigger us, to kind of cause some sort of emotion, pleasure perhaps as well. But then even pleasure can be very problematic and kind of not really straightforward. I mean, take conspiracy theories. Usually, conspiracy theories don't have a very pleasurable narrative at their heart because they're always about deception, they're always about threat, they're always about some kind of nasty actors from billionaires to lizards to whatever, aliens, you name it, controlling the world for their own benefit and disempowering us. And this cannot be in itself a very pleasurable narrative. But the pleasure is derived in a different way. Pleasure is derived by feeling like you're in the know, that you're part of this kind of privileged few who actually know the truth. Pleasure is also derived through imaginary empowerment. And therefore, let's say conspiracy theories are really popular among people who feel like they have limited control of their lives, because suddenly you have an explanation. Somebody else is responsible for, let's say, something that hasn't worked out in my life. You kind of shed away responsibility because there's some kind of massive plot going on. And likewise, if you have been ranting at your TV set for years, saying nasty words to various politicians and so on, and disliking them very heavily, now you can say, yeah, now I know why I have been right all the time. Now I know why all politicians are evil, etc., etc. That's because Bill Gates has bought them up. So again, you're kind of patting yourself at the shoulder and saying, yeah, I'm clever. I always knew that something was wrong. So again, that imaginary confirmation, imaginary empowerment is the source of kind of pleasure. So in that sense, you could say that truth is actually becoming a matter of choice. And to some extent, it's a luxury that comes with progress. Because, if you imagine somebody in prehistorical times living in a hunter-gatherer society, about to be attacked by a wild beast and thinking, no, it's not a wild beast, it's just some kind of nice furry kitten, that's not going to work out very well. But because we now have quite significant safety nets in our societies where we can actually survive without having extensive accounts of reality around us, it's easier to kind of think, well, okay, I feel good about something, or something gives me pleasure, therefore, okay, I'm going to believe it. Particularly because whatever you end up believing it, you're going to find some kind of validating information somewhere, either on social media or simply by Googling it. So again, it makes it easier to feel part of a community. And once you're part of a community, of course, you're more likely to continue with your beliefs. And this is also closely related to the fact that it's becoming easier and easier to manufacture reality as well. Now, why this particular painting? Because it's a very interesting painting. Those who have at least a passing understanding of the history of Western art would probably say, it looks very much like one of the 17th century Dutch grandmasters, potentially Rembrandt. It certainly looks very, very much like Rembrandt. And there's a very good reason why it looks like Rembrandt, even though it's not Rembrandt. This actually has been generated by a computer that was fed all the known portraits painted by Rembrandt. So the system learned the brushstroke structure, the typical composition of Rembrandt portraits, the kind of facial features, facial hair, and the fact that usually those guys have white collars, etc., etc. And it generated this particular image, this particular painting. So it was a collaborated effort between the Rembrandt Museum in Amsterdam and Microsoft, called The Next Rembrandt, and it was touted as this kind of great technological achievement, creating a new Rembrandt painting more than 300 years after the actual Rembrandt had died. But there's a more sinister, potentially, application of this technology, usually referred to as deepfakes. So this has been, since around 2017, 2018, widely discussed in terms of perhaps political threats. And indeed, one of the first really viral deepfakes was a sort of awareness-raising deepfake, from which I've added a screenshot here of Barack Obama calling Donald Trump various nasty things. It was, of course, synthetically manufactured using artificial intelligence, masterminded by the director Jordan Peele, but it kind of showed for the first time the potential of synthetic media to generate relatively believable video content, and also to generate synthetic voices to match that video. Usually, it's still kind of used for various entertainment purposes. So, for example, for the Christmas before last, one of the UK TV channels launched a deepfake Christmas address by the Queen. I mean, if you would imagine a 93-year-old at the time, Queen Elizabeth, dancing to popular TikTok tunes, that's essentially what this video is all about. Certainly, she must have had too much coffee or something. And also, deepfake Tom Cruise. That's probably the most unnerving of those videos, because it's absolutely believable. It's freakingly believable, and you can simply search, let's say, on YouTube, deepfake Tom Cruise, and it will show videos from a TikTok account that has since, I believe, been closed, that purported to be of Tom Cruise, whereas it wasn't. It's really technologically advanced in the sense that there's various movements that are very difficult to fake. For example, moving something across your face without actually the illusion being shattered, because as, let's say, a hand or an object moves across your face, it's very difficult to change all of the pixels just to follow the movement of the object, or for example, various rapid movements. Again, it's very difficult to simulate, and it's completely realistic. In terms of more recent applications, just a few weeks ago, there was a deepfake of the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, a very bad one. If you want to get acquainted with deepfakes, I would advise against starting with that one, because it's so appalling. It's completely unrepresentative of what can be done. Because somebody just took a static image of the president's body and then attached a moving head that completely doesn't match the neck and anything, and even the shade of the skin is different and so on. So it's kind of more comical than realistic. But at the same time, it kind of follows this expectation that political manipulation could be next. And again, we return to Mark here, talking about the metaverse. Now, the metaverse is a very strange topic to talk about, admittedly, because it's one of those things that everybody is talking about now, but nobody really knows what it is and whether it will actually materialize in any meaningful way. But certainly it's one of the key buzzwords in the tech community nowadays, and I think it is going to materialize in some form. So, judging by the general direction in which our engagement with media develops, it's likely that we're going to get more and more immersed in virtual worlds of various kinds, partly because we just slowly get more and more accustomed to digital interfaces of various sorts, partly due to those network effects that I already mentioned. The more people will use it, the more pressure will be on the rest of us to follow suit. And also, it's just potentially extremely profitable because we're going to leave more and more data. Virtual reality is extremely data intensive because I think of the way in which your avatar has to move in virtual reality. Everything has to be captured. Your bodily movements have to be captured. Your eye movements have to be captured because as your eyeballs move, the vision in your goggles, now it needs to adjust as well. Your emotions, your facial expressions need to be captured, again, in order for the avatar to be completely realistic. So loads and loads of things are datafied by default, and it helps create a more commercially viable picture of yourself. The downside of that is that, again, those digital environments are completely manufacturable. They're kind of manufactured by definition, and already early research in virtual reality shows that we get more immersed in VR content than any other kind of content, and therefore it's easier to convince us because we feel like things are happening all around. So already there are fears of virtual experiences being used for terrorist recruitments, let's say, and for just radicalization more broadly. And in some of the platforms that are considered to be kind of proto-early metaverses, Roblox, Fortnite, Minecraft, and so on, there are already huge problems around, let's say, neo-Nazi themed experiences, reenactments of concentration camps, but also just kind of apolitically inappropriate content. Let's say content involving sexual violence that is bad in itself, but also it's completely available for children. Let's say Roblox allows I think children from 11 or something officially to join in, and there's really no meaningful control in there. So again, there's kind of significant threats already, and if we're going to spend more time there, again, question might be, can reality really be thrown out of the window in that sense? At the same time, there's also the utopian side to that, because there's an awful trust in technology, and sometimes even too much trust in technology, seeing technology as a universal solution. Well, okay, there's an appropriate content. Yeah, let's gather more data. Let's apply more AI to detect that inappropriate information, and all will be fine. Let's deploy some smart machine learning algorithms to learn what kind of content is bad and to automatically remove that content and so on. So it's something that's called sometimes in the literature technological solutionism. To some extent, it's going to help, but then again, no such system is foolproof. And already with various automated solutions, with machine learning techniques and so on, we are witnessing huge problems in terms of bias, let's say. Mostly because those systems are completely retroactive in the sense that They can do nothing else but look at the past and the present. We don't have data about the future. We have data about what has happened in the past and what is happening now. And therefore, what they do is they reproduce already existing societal biases. If, for example, certain groups in a society, based on their ethnicity, gender, or any other criterion, are represented negatively in our society, the system is going to learn that as the default position, because that is the picture of the world in which the learning system, the learning algorithm finds itself. And so it's going to learn those kind of biases that we have today and that we have had in the past, because if we need more data, we need to also include past data, not just present data, and transfers all of that into the future, just entrenching those biases and also making them stronger. Because we're used to thinking, well, okay, if the machine has decided something, then it must be objective. Humans are biased, machines are not, because they're not influenced by anything. No, they are very good at learning from us, and because we are biased, any automated system is going to become biased as well. So if we expect some kind of cleansed and disinfected information environment based on machine learning solutions and artificial intelligence, probably that's not likely to happen, at least not fully. And also, how would that differ from the stuff that I've been talking at the very beginning in terms of structuration of our world, in terms of cleaning the world to suit our desires and our weaknesses as well. It also goes even further in the direction of just losing accountability, because it gives more and more power to technology companies. It makes code essentially new law, because whatever the automated system decides is rendered objectively true, or at least is understood as objectively true. That's kind of just the tendency that we have as users of technology, to kind of outsource thinking then to technology, outsource judgment and say, yeah, well, okay, it's kind of very convenient to us as well, because we don't have to assume any responsibility. We just say, yeah, that's the decision that was spitted out by the machine. Oh, sorry. So really, where's human agency in there? Where's our capacity to do things? Well, actually, nowhere to be found. We're kind of hardly aware of what's happening, hardly aware of what we're doing, and as you can see, I'm kind of fond of my Magritte. So really, to kind of move to some sort of interim conclusion here, because I don't have a final conclusion, simply because it's always in progress, always in development. Well, it's kind of always very, very human, because I think what is the only ethical and moral position today is to go against the trend of delegating power and responsibility and actually actively assume more personal responsibility, to become more personally involved and more personally aware. As an audience, as members of the audience, to be more aware of the way in which information is structured, to be more aware of the ways in which our choice environment is completely dependent on our digitized profiles. But also as communicators, and I think all of us are really in this position as well as scientists, actual scientists, future scientists, and practitioners as well. The way in which we communicate information, the way in which we engage with people, it's kind of a delicate balance, really, because on the one hand, we need to retain this fidelity to accuracy, to scientific fact, and to knowledge that we have generated in our profession. But at the same time, we need to realize that how people make decisions and how they formulate their opinions, it's a completely different process, that it necessitates emotion, it necessitates a narrative as well. So we need to be sure that we're not kind of boring outliers there, that we are able to say things that matter in ways that are going to be heard. So it's our duty, our responsibility as communicators of our specialist knowledge, whatever the domain of that knowledge is, to actually have the audience in mind and some of the peculiarities of our audiences in mind all the time. So really, it's not just about knowing what we do, but also thinking about, being aware of how we do it. And again, it's really important, particularly I think in our society, because let's say here in Lithuania, we are completely terrible in terms of verifying information, checking information. There's this relatively recent, from December last year, Euromonitor survey that Lithuanians are actually least likely in the EU to fact check information that we find. So in that sense, it's of course our responsibility as citizens, as audience members, to verify what we encounter and what we then share and spread in our networks. But also, it's very important to us as scientists, as practitioners, and so on, to be able to actually be those first points of contact, those first communicators that people are going to hear. Because if they hear somebody else who's less interested in facts, and they're then not listening to any alternative voices, then we have essentially lost them. And that's I think, also one of the biggest takeaways from the pandemic as well, that those people who first heard a relatively unscientific account of what's going on, those were further down the line lost to various conspiracy theories. So speed and attractiveness of sort is really, really important. But again, not losing out on accuracy. And that's a terribly difficult task. That's almost a tragic situation that we're in today, because on the one hand, we need to be quick and we need to be able to attract people. On the other hand, we can't just share and talk anything. We have to be sure that we don't mislead people. So really, two things here. Literacy, information literacy, is extremely important. But self-awareness is no less important. Being aware that all of us are fallible. All of us can be misguided if the right emotional trigger is activated at the right time, simply because we're just too busy. So really, some of the accounts of information literacy nowadays, they present this kind of idealized consumer of information who can devote loads of time to any single piece of information. And that is why I've chosen a fragment from this picture painting by Vermeer, a girl reading a letter, that we have time to just stand by the window and read something for a prolonged period of time and think about it, etc. Everything is quiet and peaceful, and we're kind of in this almost monastic silence contemplating stuff, which we aren't. We are always in a hurry, always multitasking, doing many different things. So just being mindful, being aware of that, of the constant potential of being deceived, I think that is the information analog of immunity that we can have. So thank you very much for your attention, and if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to respond. I think we need to. Let's just try a microphone, because otherwise I think people watching us on YouTube or somewhere else are not going to hear anything.
Yeah, I was wondering whether there was some kind of studies or any information on what personal characteristics lean more towards the misinformation and the echo chambers and all of that. If there's like I'm asking in the hopes that maybe we can develop some sort of characteristics, or if there's any information on that.
Yeah, so there are various studies being made, and actually we have recently completed one of the first such studies in Lithuania, because usually those studies are based on either US or some kind of Western European society. So we really wanted to check if those traits apply here as well. And the early data that we have shows that typically there's some kind of fatalist attitude involved. And it really correlates with something I mentioned, this sense that you are losing out, you are missing out. And that could be for various reasons. That could be, in our case, in Lithuanian case, we also tried to tease out other variables, such as their economic status and so on. So usually that would correlate with, among the sort of 50 plus, that would correlate with a feeling that they have kind of lost out in the post-communist transformation, or perhaps they had skills that were no longer useful, or they failed to adjust to a capitalist society and so on. In other cases, that correlated with various, how should I frame it? Well, with worldview positions, so attitudes towards, let's say, gay marriage and similar things. So again, if probably you feel like your society is moving forward more quickly than you want to accept, then there must be a reason why it's doing so. And maybe there's some kind of uber global gay conspiracy going on. But what's also interesting is that it seems that this is not limited to a particular generation. There seems to be a fair bit of socialization going on as well, in the sense that it can't be tied to, let's say, the fact that, we have transformed from one kind of political regime to another 30 years ago, and it's still affecting us. Well, it is, but it's affecting other generations as well. So even among, let's say, 20 plus, there seems to be, I would say, a fair amount of intergenerational learning, probably because you've been hearing in your family, how bad everything is, how the government is rotten, etc., etc., etc. You probably are going to internalize at least some of those views, unless you're kind of rebellious and want to react against it completely. So this kind of generally fatalist attitude that I would have said, because those same people would then be also more willing to believe in horoscopes, in various omens, and that kind of stuff. So, but then at the same time, I think if we are tying this to marginalization, pretty much every one of us can feel marginalized on some issue. It might just be different matters for different people. It might not be the economy, it might not be civil partnership, gay marriage, whatever. It could be something completely different. But again, if the disinformation is tied to the matter that is really important to you and where you feel like you're misunderstood, underappreciated, and so on, then it's still going to be successful. So I think for a conspiracy theorist or for any actor intending to spread disinformation, the key element is to find some sort of dissatisfaction, a feeling of underappreciation, and so on. But that's not a completely new piece of knowledge. That's what, for example, various secret services and so on have been using for recruitment, let's say, particularly double agent recruitment, where you find people who are dissatisfied with their organization, you offer them self-realization opportunities and so on. So it's really universal in terms of how it can be abused.
So I have a question on how do we check and balance these data-rich platforms and companies, especially in the democratic process?
That, I think, is really a great problem. Because on the one hand, a simple answer could be, well, let's have some rules and let's regulate them. And that is what's happening to some extent, particularly within the European Union, in the new proposed digital, I'm not entirely sure how it's called exactly, but the new act that's going to oversee digital platforms. Those platforms that enjoy a dominant position, they're going to be very closely monitored. They're going to have to disclose some of their practices, etc., etc. But whether that's going to be effective, probably not really, because just with any regulation, you can find a workaround. And also regulation has this problem that it only follows. You can't regulate something that's not existent. So again, it's always looking at the past, what technologies have been developed. And by the time you enact legislation, it's going to be outdated because there's going to be some new way of making use of our vulnerabilities. In another context, particularly, let's say in the US, it's just becoming such a partisan matter that any regulation is going to be ineffective at all. So in terms of democratic societies, that's really a problem. It's not to say that non-democratic societies would be better. There, if you're thinking of China, increasingly Russia as well, there's just a complete synthesis of social media platforms and government, and all the data is being shared, and public opinion is being patrolled very effectively. So again, Probably no society has good solutions. I think democracy has the least bad solution in the sense that, well, at least there's no complete monopoly of data and truth. At least we have competing platforms, and at the very least, we can perhaps explore different information contexts, different platforms, and the ways they structure information. But I think the only really effective way is to start with ourselves. And I think a certain level of, I sometimes use the term masochism just for provocation purposes. A certain degree of masochism is really useful here, because we need to, from time to time at least, intentionally try to get out of that information bubble, to intentionally search for other opinions, to intentionally interact with content that we're not particularly fond of, just to kind of remind ourselves that there's a completely different world out there of which we can be absolutely ignorant. And if we just shut ourselves in our information bubbles, of course, there's also going to be demonization, because now it's us versus them. Us, who consume the right information and therefore are clever and nice and really, really great, and them, who, because they are different, because they consume different information and so on, must be the opposite to us. And if we are good, then by definition they're bad. So kind of trying to transcend that is very important. At the same time, I'm not really optimistic that this is going to happen on a grand scale, because we need conscious effort, and our technology is moving, and has always been moving, towards making things more effortless. I mean, that's what I think technological progress has been all about since humans learned how to make fire, making life easier for ourselves. And putting in extra effort where it seems unnecessary might be slightly too much to ask. So I don't think there are good responses and good ways out, unfortunately. Any other? Well, on this happy note, let's call it a day, I think. Well, thank you. Thank you for your attention and for listening to me.